It's time. Time to repair. Time to restore. Time to revive. It's time for the Cure National Policy Summit 2017.
Arthur C. Brooks is president of the American Enterprise Institute. He served as president since January 1st of 2009. He is also the Beth and Ravenel Curry Scholar in Free Enterprise. Before joining AEI, Dr. Brooks was the Lewis A. Bantle Professor of Business and Government in the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs at Syracuse University, where he taught economics and social entrepreneurship. Prior to his work in academia and public policy, he spent 12 years as a classical musician in the United States and Spain. Dr. Brooks is contributing opinion writer for the New York Times and best-selling author of 11 books on topics including the role of government, fairness, economic opportunity, happiness, and the morality of free enterprise. His latest book is the New York Times bestseller, The Conservative Heart. It is a great book. How to Build a Fairer, Happier, and More Prosperous America. He has also published dozens of academic articles and journals and the textbook Social Entrepreneurship. So Dr. Brooks has a PhD and a master's in philosophy in public analysis from the Pardee Rand Graduate School. He also holds an MA in economics from Florida Atlantic University and a BA in economics from Thomas Edison State College. Everyone here has so many degrees, and it's just phenomenal. But I also want to say this. I had the pleasure of hearing Arthur Brooks at the Leadership Network and a few other different venues, as well as reading his book. He is practical, he's insightful, he's caring, he brings incredible thought with a balance to real tough problems, and we really appreciate Dr. Arthur Brooks.
Thank you so very much. Thank you for that incredibly gracious introduction, and what an honor and a blessing it is to have you in our home. Thank you for your time, and thank you for the support of our work, and we're delighted to host you in this summit. I want to take a few minutes now and talk to you about some of the bigger issues that are in our country as we see them, and submit a few ideas to you for your interest. You know, it's an alarming time in the United States because of the cynicism that we see. You know, no matter where you sit politically, nobody likes the conditions that have led to the current environment. I think that's fair to say. And the cynicism that we see is bubbling up to real questions, fundamental questions about the legitimacy of our American system. You know, in my job as president of this place, you know, we have 250 full-time staff and faculty, and so most of what I do as chief executive, this is a nonprofit based entirely on philanthropy. It's not going to surprise you. Most of my time is spent raising money. Okay? And a lot of you spend a whole lot of time raising money too, so you know how it works. So the great thing is for the next 30 minutes, I'm not raising any money. But the wonderful thing about raising money is that you're always talking to people who've done amazing things. I mean, the dirty secret of fundraising is you talk to people who've been successful, and you ask them their secrets to success, and you learn these secrets. And so I always ask these major donors to my organization, tell me your story. Now, I have this one friend, and he's a major donor, and he grew up in Wichita, Kansas. And I asked him, tell me in your own words, your own story of success. And here's the story he told me. He said, it's very simple, my secret, my pathway to success. It started when I was 12 years old. I said, 12 years old? He says, yeah. I was out at the edge of town, at the edge of, there was an orchard, and I was looking over this fence, and there's this apple tree, and it was full of these big, beautiful red apples, and I was admiring the apples, and the farmer walks up to me, and he said, hey, kid, you like those apples? And I said, yeah, they look so delicious. And he said, I'll give you one for a nickel. And I had a nickel, because my dad had just given me my allowance. He was sort of cheap. And then he said, and so he gave me the apple, and I was about to bite into it, but I just was shining it on my shirt, and I was walking into town. And as just weird coincidence had it, a businessman walked up to me, and he said, hey, kid, that's a beautiful-looking apple. I'll give you a dime for it. And I said, that's 100% profit margin. And a business was born. I took my dime back out to the orchard, and I got 2 apples, and I brought it back into town, and I doubled my money. And I said, huh. And the next day I took my money out and I brought it back in, and every day I had 100% profit margin, and I did this every day. By the end of 2 weeks, I was taking my bike out there and coming back in with a box of apples. Now, as soon as I could drive, which in Kansas is 14, I started taking my uncle's truck out to the edge of town, and I started bringing in boxes of apples. Every week, doubling my money. And this is my secret to success. This went on day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, and then my father died and left me $100 million. So that's not what you were expecting. The problem is, that's how a lot of Americans see the secret to success today. You know, it starts off with that story, but it ends up with, oh yeah, it was rigged all along, wasn't it? That's a problem. That's the beginning of cynicism. When people see successful people, when they see you and me and people who are more successful than you and me, and they say, I bet it was rigged. I bet the whole system was fixed. The fix was in. So I've been thinking, how do we tell better stories that can inspire people to do their best and earn their success? Because I think that looking at the richest people in the country and making believe that anybody can be a billionaire is the wrong way of doing it. And I'm going to tell you why, and I'm going to tell you who I think the real heroes are. And if we tell these stories, I think that we can renew the American dream together. That's my proposition to you today. Now, you heard in that really gracious introduction that in my past I've done a lot of different things. I was a musician for a long time, and then I was a professor for a long time. I taught entrepreneurship. And I would have these MBA students at the business school, and they would always ask me the same question: what's the secret to being a successful entrepreneur? That kind of got me into the momentum of asking these people that question I just told you about. But the students would say, what's the secret to being a really successful, wildly successful entrepreneur? And I always tell the stories of the most famous people, Alexander Graham Bell and Henry Ford and Andrew Carnegie, or the guy who actually lived in this building, Andrew Mellon. And I would tell, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and the whole thing, but my heart was never in those stories. And I'm going to tell you why. Because I know the truth. And, I don't believe that the fix is in, but I will tell you some hard truths about the richest people in this country. There's an organization that you've heard called the Gallup polling organization, and their best product is called the Strengths Finder. That's a survey in which you go and you log on, you pay a couple of bucks, and you answer about 300 questions, and it has a sophisticated statistical algorithm that takes all your data and it spits out what you're good at. Why? Because everybody knows your mother taught you and everybody taught you that you should figure out what you're really good at and do that. That's the secret to success, right? So I was looking at the Gallup Strengths Finder, and one of the things that can tell you you're a naturally good person at is entrepreneurship. Are you a natural entrepreneur or no? It turns out that only 2% of the population is naturally entrepreneurial. Now, furthermore, only 1/4 of them, or 1/2 of 1%, is capable of running a major organization. Okay, 1/2 of 1% is capable of being a successful entrepreneur and running a large organization. So when my MBA students come to me and say, what's the secret? Do you know the secret to successful entrepreneurship? I don't want to say, yes, I do know it, and you don't have it. That's not motivational. So I kind of shied away from that a little bit. But there's another problem too, which is I've seen the psychological profile of the richest people. And there's a psychiatry professor at Johns Hopkins University named John Gartner. He's a neuropsychologist, actually, and he does psychological portraits of very rich and famous people. And what does he find? He finds that successful entrepreneurs have a lot of wonderful things: high energy, high creativity, ability to work and work and work, low levels of honesty, low levels of happiness. That's not success, my friends. You know what success is for me? Faith, family, friends, sanctifying my ordinary work in service of others. That's success. That's not what you see. So I have a problem on my hands. What's the secret to entrepreneurship? I don't know. I don't know. I have a PhD in that. I don't know. Problematic. So I stopped talking about it for years. I didn't answer the question. And then I found the answer by accident last year. See, I was shooting a movie that's going to come out in the spring. It's called In Pursuit. And it talks about how people can build their lives, how the free enterprise system, when it works at the margins of society, when it reaches to the periphery, to the least of these, our brothers and sisters, that's when it fulfills the promise of the free enterprise system, doesn't it? And so I was going to these programs that I'd heard about that did this best. You know, there's a place in New York that I go to called Ready, Willing, and Able, the Doe Fund in New York City that takes guys off the streets and through ordinary work builds their lives. And I went to this place in Houston that really captured my imagination. It's called the Prison Entrepreneurship Program. Just what it sounds like, right? I mean, these guys, these Christian guys in Houston, they were entrepreneurs, businessmen, and they go into the Texas State Penitentiary system, and it gets 2,500 guys, self-selected, who are, you know, all different walks of life. It doesn't screen them, but it makes them self-select and say, you're 1 year away from getting out. There's a problem, which is it's hard to find work. Create your own work. Okay, now, let me pause on that for a quick second and tell you why I want you to join all of me in being a warrior for criminal justice reform. Okay? The truth of the matter is in America that nobody regrets criminals being locked up, right? What we regret is that we don't know how to rehabilitate anybody. That's the problem, isn't it? Re-entry is a big problem in this country. So I look at the data on criminal justice reform, and you find two statistics that make it so that we can't be a great country unless we solve these things. Number one, a 70% unemployment rate for people, especially men, who've been in prison. And number two is a 50% reincarceration rate within the first 24 months when people get out of prison. You know these two statistics, you know we have a crisis on our hands for people who've been inmates, for their families, for their communities, and for all of us. We have to solve these things. Okay, that's why I went to Houston, because these guys are getting it right. I look at their population. Okay, there's a 50% reincarceration rate nationally for people who've been in prison. They have a 7% reincarceration rate. Right? 1 in 7. 1 in 7. So what are they doing right? That's what I want to know. That's what I want to know. And they said, here's the deal. The problem is when you get out of prison, people don't want to hire you, so create your own job. Okay. I start talking to the guys, and it's unbelievable. You go, and you know, they're in their last year of prison, they're about to get out, and they're saying, what do you want to do? And it's not entrepreneurship as we always talk about it, like high-tech pharmaceutical products and software. No, it's like landscaping firms and barbecue joints and, you know, ordinary stuff. Real entrepreneurship, real life. And they describe their businesses with vividness and it's inspirational. And then you talk to the guys who came out, and they take you to meet these guys who are, you know, working for the very first time in there's these businesses, and it just fills your heart with love. But then I asked this question: what percentage of these guys? 7% are going back to prison, which is great. What percentage are starting their businesses? It's gonna be like 95%, man. 16%. 84% don't start businesses. This is a mystery to me. This is a riddle to me. What's the explanation for this? Because it looks like they all failed, right? Here's what I got wrong. I started asking and talking to these guys, and here's what I got wrong. I went to Houston to find the secret to start up businesses, and what I found was the secret to start up lives. Here's the secret to entrepreneurship. Your life is an enterprise. The resources are under your control. Treat them like an entrepreneur and succeed. When I found that out, when I started talking to them, I stopped looking at billionaires. See, the bias in our society is to look at people who went from the middle to the top. That's wrong. If you want to find the secret to success, look at people who went from the bottom to the middle. That's the secret to success. That's the American dream. Now, I started thinking about this and digging in on it more, and I'm going to tell you more about some of the stuff that I found, some of the real secrets that I found. But I want to connect this to the American dream just a tiny bit more for you. See, this is a country that was not built on the back of rich people. This is a country that was built on the back of poor people. This is a country where the true entrepreneurs were our ancestors. Everybody in this room, everybody in this company, everybody in this city has a different story. Some of the people and my colleagues and some of your great-grandparents were scratching out potatoes someplace, some godforsaken village, and some were running from a pogrom, and a lot of your ancestors came here involuntarily. But let me tell you what we all have in common in this room. We all come from ambitious riffraff, and we're proud of it. We're proud of it. That's what makes us Americans. You know, it's like you go to any other country and you say, tell me about your ancestors. Riff-raff. It's like, that's not a good thing in other places. But you built it. You wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be the kind of people that you are doing what you have done had it not been for the ambition of those people who came from the margins of society. That's the essence of true life entrepreneurship. Your ancestors had startup lives. And you know who the best models of them are today? It's not Bill Gates. It's not Steve Jobs. It's the guys in the prison entrepreneurship program. These are the people we need to emulate. Now it's becoming clear to me. I got it wrong when I was teaching at the university all these years. All these people in front of me, all around me, the people at the margins that we pity and we call charity cases are actually the heroes. We got to tell their stories. Yes, that's good. Okay. So now I start digging into their stories, and it gets better. It gets better. How? Because it turns out that they have secrets. And when you learn their secrets, you can improve your life. I'm writing a book called The Startup Life, based on the secrets from the people that made their way from the bottom to the middle. And it's changing my life. And I want to tell you 2 secrets right now. I want to share 2 of them with you that are the most surprising. And I'm completely convinced that if all of us do these things starting today, we'll be happier before tonight. I submit this to you for your interest and for your consideration. Secret number 1 of the startup life: take more risk. You know, it sounds crazy when you're talking to ex-convicts to say take more risk, doesn't it? It sounds crazy. Because, you know, when you talk to guys who've been in prison, they're amazingly forthcoming about their mistakes. Incredible. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's funny, too. I mean, this one guy says, yeah, you know, I robbed a liquor store downstairs from my house. You know, and it's like, that's not a very smart risk. That's not a smart risk. I mean, I don't mean to give you advice, sir, but, you know, or, you know. And so you want to say, don't live in such a risky way when you get out, right? But it turns out that's exactly wrong, and I'm going to tell you why. And the answer to the reason that that's not the right advice comes from a piece of research that I've been thinking about a lot, from an economist at the University of Chicago. His name is Stephen Levitt. If you know that name, it's because he wrote a very famous best-selling book called Freakonomics. He's one of the greatest economists of his generation. Not because he has better technical skills, but because he asks better questions. You know, I mean, a lot of you are successful not just because you have the right answers, but because you have the right questions. Interesting people have the right questions. Steve Levitt recently has been writing about how we answer the biggest questions and how we settle the biggest controversies in our lives. And he starts with this premise. At any given time, probably about 1/3 of us are wrestling with a major life problem, a major life decision, right? Should I do this or that? I mean, some of it's really easy. Like, you know, I'm hungry, should I go eat lunch? Obviously, yes. That's not a big life decision. But you get to these pivotal moments in your life. Should I go to law school or keep working? Should I ask her to marry me? Stuff like that. And you just don't know. And some of you, by the way, I'm looking out in this room, some of you are struggling with a major life decision right now, and you don't know what to do. Here's Stephen Levitt's question. How do people generally answer that question? Do they say yes too much, or do they say no too much? It's kind of an interesting question, right? Are we too entrepreneurial, or are we too risk averse in the way that we treat our own lives? So here's how he did the research. He advertised saying, are you struggling? Are you agonizing over a major life decision? If you are, let me make that decision for you as part of this study with the flip of a coin. 6,000 people signed up. So, I mean, this is such a great country, isn't it? I mean, it's like, I can't decide to ask my girlfriend to marry me or not, so I'm going to ask this professor to flip a coin for me. I mean, that's crazy. That's crazy, right? But, okay, all right, these people were in agony. It's like, settle this for me. Just settle this for me. Okay. So they sign up for the thing, and he doesn't actually flip a coin. A computer does it and sends back the decision. Yes is heads, do it, right? No is tails, don't do it, stay, right? Now, most people, it turns out, they don't answer the question at all, and when you don't answer a question like that, the answer is no because time passes, and it becomes a no. Okay, so he sends it back, and it's 50-50, and now it gets interesting because a year later, he follows up to see who's happier, the yeses or the nos. Right now, 1 to 10 scale. 1 is misery, 10 is bliss, right? He finds that the yeses are 1 entire digit happier than the nos. What does this tell you? We have a no bias in our culture. We have a no bias in our lives. You want to be happier? Say yes more. Now, this is really interesting to me because I see this around here a lot. You know, we have sort of a barbell workforce where a lot of people are older than me who are scholars, and a lot of people are younger than me, research assistants and staff. And, you know, Washington, D.C. is, put it this way, it's an unhealthy dating market. It's not the best place to find healthy love, right? And so it's the weirdest thing to me, you know, because I've been locked down. My wife and I have been married for going on 30 years now. And so it's just been a really super long time. I don't even remember dating, right? It's like, that's classic, by the way. My wife will say, it feels like 10 minutes underwater, right? So, I know. It's not right, but what are you going to do? So, but I'll talk to these young guys here, and, you know, they'll talk a little bit about their love lives, and I don't mean to pry, and they'll say, so how long have you been dating your girlfriend? And they'd be like, 8 years. 8 years? So how's it going? Man, I really love her. What should I do? I got the data on what you should do. I got the data. I got the study. You know what you should do? You should go to your apartment and put on your favorite music for like an hour. And then you should go over to her house and you should get down on one knee. And you should hope that she says yes to you. That's the happiest life. Say yes more. Okay, let's get back to the prison entrepreneurship program, right? You know what's scary? You know what we're saying no to? Love. Saying yes to crime is easy for a lot of people. You know what's hard? Is saying yes to the mother of your children, saying yes to your children themselves, saying yes to a boring job that you're going to commit to going to every single day. That's risky for a lot of people. Look, that's risky for you. These are the big risks in life. And that's what the guys started telling me, that when they made the commitment to do the thing that they were most afraid of, which was committing their heart to their wife and to their children and to the Lord, that's when actually those risks paid off and their lives changed. Now, maybe you're thinking to yourself, you're comparing entrepreneurship with family life. I got another study. This is from the University of Finland earlier in 2017. And these researchers, these neuropsychologists, were taking 2 groups of guys who had started businesses and dads, all men in their 30s, and they're putting them in fMRI machines and looking at brain scans to compare the brain activity of these 2 populations. They took the entrepreneurs and they showed them a picture, a photo of their business, and they took the dads and they showed them a photo of their kids. Same photo. Same brain activity between the 2 groups. And the researchers, they said, well, we've either found that entrepreneurs see their businesses as their children, or the dads see their kids as little startups. One way or the other. If you're a dad or you're a mom, it's a startup life. Say yes more. That's all of us. It's probably the right decision. That's startup life secret number 1. Startup life secret number 2. Don't just look for your strengths for your success. Look for your weaknesses as your source of success. This is such a hard one, you know? I mean, everybody knows that you should exploit your strengths and you should wire around your weaknesses, that you should ignore your weaknesses, you should run away from your weaknesses, you should deny your weaknesses. That's how people are going to appreciate you more, is on the basis of your exhibited strengths. But every entrepreneur knows that that is not the case. St. Paul said, when I am weak, that's when I'm strong. Was it just talk? No. Now, here's the funny thing. There's a Malcolm Gladwell, the author who writes for The New Yorker. He wrote this book that maybe some of you read called David and Goliath. What was the point of the story of David and Goliath? We've heard it since we were children, over and over and over again. And here's what we always learn. The Lord worked through David against all odds to beat somebody much stronger than he was. Here's the problem historically with that interpretation. Okay? The problem with it is Goliath never stood a chance because David used his weakness to beat Goliath. Okay, now, Goliath was a Philistine warrior. David was an Israelite shepherd boy. They were paired one-on-one to settle the final battle between the armies. Everybody knows the story. What we don't remember is that the Philistine giant was wearing probably 200 pounds of armor and carrying an enormous sword. The shepherd boy could use a sling and actually sling a rock this size as fast as the bullet of a .38 caliber revolver, with precision of up to 2 inches at 35 yards. Who do you want to be? The guy with 200 pounds of armor who can't move and has an exposed forehead? Or the guy with the equivalent of a rifle with a scope? Goliath never stood a chance. But if David had taken it on the strength of Goliath, he would have lost. He used his weakness, his mobility, his ability actually to aim as his source of strength. We need to remember that because each of you and me, we have weaknesses that we're running away from that we're not using. The pep guys reminded me that. They reminded me of this. Okay, now, how? When you talk to the pep guys, you know, it's funny, you know, this one guy, he's in our movie, his name is Mark Zartuche. He went to prison for 5 years. He was smuggling drugs across the Mexican border. Nobody's in favor of that. He had to leave his children when he went to prison. It's a terrible story. But when he got out, he started this beautiful business, and you talk to him about his business, but he doesn't want to talk about his business. He wants to talk about what he's really all about, which is going and warning young guys not to make his mistakes. The source of his true entrepreneurial power is not his landscaping business. It's exploiting his weakness to be a source of strength and connecting him with the lives of other people. That's true entrepreneurship, isn't it? I talked to this one guy. So interesting, you know, because sometimes, you know, smuggling drugs across the Mexican border, you can't relate to that. I know you can't relate to that, and I can't relate to it either. But there are stories that you can relate to. I knew one guy, and you know, he looks like me. You know, it's like just a kind of a bald nerd, right? And he says, I said, you went to prison? He said, yeah. What happened? Well, he actually grew up in a wealthy family. I didn't, but he grew up in this wealthy family, and he said that he'd never really adjusted. He used drugs and alcohol. He started smoking dope when he was in 8th grade, you know, like a lot of sort of dissolute kids, and he started drinking when he was in high school, and he went to college, and he never took it seriously, and he partied his way through college, and then he said he was coming home from a party one night during his senior year in college, and he was very drunk. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and he ran over a pedestrian and killed him. Now, your life is over, right? I mean, any one of us in this room would prefer to be the pedestrian. I mean, it's a toss-up at this point, because your life is over either way. So he had to make a decision. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? He went to prison for 6 months. It's not a long time, but it's a problem because he comes out with a criminal conviction, but more importantly, he comes out with a moral conviction. What am I going to do with this? Am I going to run away from it? Am I going to pretend it never happened? Am I going to get my dad to get me a job? It's from a very wealthy, very well-known family. He said no. He dedicated his life to becoming a drug and alcohol counselor. Why? Because he was going to use this experience to help other people who are on his path not reach his destination. That is strength, my friends. That is turning your weakness into your strength. Do you have a weakness that you're running away from that could be the source of your strength? He asked me that. I said, of course not. Then I thought about it. And I do. And I want to tell you about it. Because I learned a lot from something that was my biggest weakness. And he put it together for me, and the PEP guys put it together for me when I started following their example. And I want to tell you about it. You know, in the introduction, you heard about this kind of weird background that I have. I mean, most people who are the president of a think tank and a college professor don't start off as, musicians. But it was a little sketchier than that, actually. I went to college when I was right out of high school, but I only lasted a year. I dropped out, kicked out, splitting hairs. And I went on the road as a French horn player, and life was pretty good. I didn't make any money, but life was pretty sweet. And I met my future wife, and she was in the front row of a concert. And the reason I went to play in the Barcelona Symphony is because I chased this girl I didn't even know. I gave up my job, and I moved to Barcelona, and got down on one knee and asked her to marry me, and she did. And life was pretty good. Life was pretty good. But it always bugged me that I had failed in this one thing in college. Now, I have nothing against not going to college. I have nothing against staying out of college. I mean, my wife graduated from high school when she was 29 years old. And she didn't go to college, and let me tell you, if I had some sort of bias against this, I wouldn't stand a day in my health. And because we're all the same, and you could be smart in all sorts of walks of life, but it always bugged me about me, right? That I did. And it was very disappointing to my parents. So I started when I was in my late 20s asking my friends, what should I do? And one of my friends said, well, you should go to correspondence school, because if you do that, you can do it without any money and when you're on the road. I said, So I started doing some research, and I found a school, this is in the 90s, a long time before today with the internet days, and I found this college in Trenton, New Jersey, in an old warehouse. And they offered degrees by, correspondence courses and equivalency exams and the whole thing, and I signed up when I was 28 years old. And I worked my tail off. I worked like crazy. And I got my bachelor's degree entirely by correspondence 1 month before my 30th birthday. And I was really, really proud of that, because I had worked so hard. And I got straight A's too. I killed it in correspondence school, right? And but then I didn't know what to do next. I mean, I didn't know what I should do with it. So I wrote to one of my mail order professors. And I said, what should I do next? And he wrote back to me and he said, you did really, really well in my classes. I think you should go get a PhD. And I said, really? I mean, that blew my mind. My dad had a PhD, and he was a college professor, but I'd never thought about this. I'd been a musician. It was a different world to me. And so I wrote back to him, and I said, where should I do my PhD? And he wrote back to me and he said, I think you should do it at Harvard. Harvard. And it filled me with confidence for the very first time. It was a great feeling. And so I said, you know what? And I talked to my wife, and she said, you should do that. And so we decided we're going to change our lives, and I wrote my application to Harvard with love and with affection and with seriousness, and I sent it in, and I got rejected in 2 days. It was like, no, right? Because it turns out that at Harvard, they weren't in the market for a 30-year-old, French horn playing college dropout with a correspondence degree. Who knew, right? Who knew? That's weird, right? So, by the way, Thursday, I'm giving a talk at Harvard, and I'm telling this story. Yeah, So, okay, but at this point, all I've got is a rejection letter from Harvard University, and I still don't know what to do. So, and I had no information because I was on my own. And so I said to my wife, I'm going to call them and see how close I came. And she says, you're an idiot, right? It's like, nobody does this, right? But I said, no, I need more information. So I called up the admissions office at Harvard University, and this really nice lady gets on the phone. I said, I just got rejected from your PhD program. She said, I'm sorry. So I said, no. It's fine, but I just need you to tell me, how close did I come? And she's, all right. And I hear her go, and I hear her opening and closing filing cabinets and rustling papers. And she comes back after 2 minutes, and she said, not close. And I was really humiliated. So now I'm bargaining. I'm like, was I in the top half? And she says, no. And it was horrible. It was horrible. So I went down the next level and I got rejected. I went down the next level again. And finally, I got down to the level where I found a graduate school that wasn't paying close attention, and I got in. All right? And I never told anybody, right? I never told anybody because I was ashamed of it, because it wasn't very good. It wasn't good enough. All my friends in graduate school, they'd all gone to these fancy universities, right? These really great universities. Where'd you go to? Hey, where'd you do your undergrad? University, right? Change the subject, right? And then I got out and I went on the market and I got a college teaching job at Georgia State University. And after a couple of years, I went to Syracuse, which was a really good university in my field. And I never told anybody. I still never told anybody. Where'd you do your undergraduate? Change the subject. I didn't lie. I mean, it was on my CV, and that was on the internet, but nobody knew what this, I mean, when you heard about it at the very beginning, he got his bachelor's degree from Thomas Edison State College in Trenton, New Jersey. It's like, sounds legit. Right? So basically, I'm just being cool for decades. And then 2008 comes along. I've been an academic for 10 years, and I'm publishing papers. I'm a full professor. I have an endowed chair at Syracuse University, and the American Enterprise Institute calls. And this is the fanciest think tank in Washington, D.C. Everybody here went to Harvard. Like, I only hire people out of Harvard, practically, right? I mean, it's like I'm kind of a hypocrite, but there you are. And so I come here to be president in 2008, and I still never tell anybody about this background, about this bachelor's degree from a correspondence school. But that changed all of a sudden a year after I came here. And here's how it changed. I hired a scholar, this guy, and he had this impeccable credentials. He did his undergraduate degree at Dartmouth and his PhD at University of California, Berkeley. I mean, he's the guy I always wanted to be. And his specialty was the economics of higher education. And we have complete academic freedom here. It's like a college faculty where people can do whatever work they want with complete freedom, and I don't tell them what to do. I just hire geniuses and put a roof over their head. Okay, so his name is Andrew. Andrew comes in, and I sit him down, and higher education is very messed up in this country. You all know that. It's too expensive, there's too much debt, people don't finish, and there's not enough intellectual diversity, and they have discrimination against people who are religious, and it's not right. It's not right. So I brought in Andrew, and I sat him in my office and said, what's the first expose you're going to do, Andrew? And he said, I've always wanted to do a big study on fly-by-night correspondence schools. And I'm thinking, the jig is up, right? It's like one of those old movies where a guy is running away from the sheriff and his dogs, and I'm like running up an old creek bed, trying to stay at it. It's like... But I don't say anything, because, maybe nothing happens, right? Being cool. Maybe he doesn't find out. Month goes by. I get an email in the middle of the night from Andrew. Hey, Arthur. I'm looking at the Wikipedia site for this place called Thomas Edison State College, and they're claiming you're an alum. So, dude, you got to get that cleared up, he says, right? So now I got a problem. Look, I'm not going to get fired. I mean, I'm already the president of this place, right? But this is pretty embarrassing. There's going to be some sort of newspaper story on this thing for sure, right? So I decided, go big or go home. I wrote about it myself in the New York Times. And I wrote about it, and I wrote an article called My Cheap, Valuable College Degree, where I explained that I got my whole bachelor's degree, including the books, for 10 grand in today's dollars. And that included a sticker for the car, which I didn't put on my car because I was embarrassed. Graduation day, right? I walked out to my mailbox in my slippers and picked up my diploma and marched back in, right? So I publish it in the Times, and I think, what's going to happen? And I waited, right? And it wasn't what I expected. You know, I thought people were going to say, that hack, that patsy, that faker, that guy who's running American Enterprise Institute, it turns out he's no good, right? You know what I got instead? It was the #1 piece in the New York Times for 2 solid weeks, and I started getting email from people I'd never met before. I got, this lady, she writes to me and she says, my son is 31, and he dropped out of college 10 years ago, and he's really struggling. And I showed him your article, and I think he's going to sign up at Thomas Edison. Thank you for giving my son a second chance. Huh. I got hundreds of letters from people I'd never met before. And here's the amazing thing. Here's what I realized when I embraced that weakness. I didn't want to embrace that weakness, my friends. I was forced into embracing that weakness. And when I did, you know what I realized? My career is dedicated to Matthew 25:40. That's my career. That the least of these, my brothers and sisters, that's what I'm supposed to be spending my life talking about and spending and working on opportunity. And the reason I love the free enterprise system is because it serves the people at the periphery of our society if we do it right. That's why I'm so into it, right? But there's one thing that connects me most to the people at the periphery of society, one thing that connects me to people who are poor and the first generation to go to college and people who don't have opportunity, and that was my college education. And I'd spent 20 years running away from it. So here's a question. What are you embarrassed about that connects you to people at the periphery of society? How is it the source of your strength, your Christian strength? How can you use that today to lift somebody up? Remember that your ancestors and mine were the people at the periphery of society. These are the heroes. Those are the lessons number 1 and 2, when I'm finished with this book in a year or a year and a half or God knows when, it'll have the other 10 or 20 or whatever they are. But if we can use these things, if we can have these heroes, if we can remember who are the people who should inspire us and lift us up, we can lift other people up who need us most today. Who are these people? You know them, but they're all around us in places that we can't see too. Let me finish by reminding you where I often see them now today, or to remember how this story actually finishes. I told you I got a lot of mail and email from people after I outed myself about my correspondence school degree. One of the letters that I got, actually calls that I got, was from the president of Thomas Edison State College. He's like, that guy runs a think tank in Washington. That's awesome. So he calls me up and he says, would you be our commencement speaker this year? And I thought, well, what's the commencement for a correspondence school? Is it like 8 guys in a conference room? I mean, what is it, right? I don't know. I mean, it could be anything, actually. So I go to Trenton, and I'm taking at the time, my 13-year-old son. He's now getting ready to go to college himself. His name is Carlos. And Carlos and I went up there, and it turns out it was in the Trenton ice rink. And there were 5,000 people there. And there were hundreds of people crossing the stage, one after the other. And I gave this little commencement address about happiness and about, the good life. And I don't remember what I even said, because what really had an impression on me was the graduates. And my fellow graduates, actually. But it was connecting me to the people who were really the heroes. There were a lot of immigrants. There were a third active military. Virtually everybody was the first person in the history of their family to go to college. It was the essence of what it means to be an American who's trying to earn his or her success. And there was this one lady that I remember. This had a huge impact. It's like it was yesterday. This lady, she's like 45. And, each person gets to stop, and they have just no time. There's hundreds of people. They get to say their name and one thing, right? And so she gets her diploma, and she goes to the mic. She's got lines on her face, right? I mean, she's really lived. And she says, for this moment, I just want to thank my 5 children and the Son of the living God. And I thought, that's a startup life. That's my ancestors. That's my hero. That's who I want to be. Connect me to her. Tell her story. We are one in this experience together. Find the startup lives in your midst. Tell these stories. Inspire people where they are. And in so doing, you will learn these skills yourself, and so will I, and we can all live better lives together. God bless you, and thank you.
If you have any questions, please contact the Cure's National Clergy Network office at 202-479-2873 or visit our website at urbancure.org.